Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We are presented by CLNS Media. Today is going to be a little bit different. This is going to be kind of a pilot test episode of a podcast idea that our good friend of the program, Reags, and I have had for a long time and kind of have just brought it to fruition. I think that for a while we've wanted to create a daily podcast that was accessible for a lot of people. And I think we finally found a way into it. The way we're going to do it is we're going to look at lines every morning. And we're not going to talk about games particularly from the perspective of betting. This is not going to be a tout podcast, but we are going to kind of preview the games. We're going to talk about what we like, what we don't like. We'll probably give a pick just for the hell of it, but I wouldn't take this as a tout podcast. I would take it as a show where we're literally just talking basketball and talking about these teams, and we're going to do it short form. We're going to do it 15 to 20 minutes every episode, and then on Fridays / like Saturday mornings, we might try and do like a 30-minute episode just because Saturdays end up being so crazy. But our goal here is just to do a daily podcast where we talk about college basketball. And again, because of this intro, this one might be just a touch longer than what we normally will do, but I think we're going to have a good time with it. And before we get into the games that we're going to talk about, Reags, how's it going, buddy?
It's good. I do want to apologize to anybody listening if I do cut out or it sounds weird. I'm sitting in a McDonald's parking lot getting some free Wi-Fi as we do this. So that will change going forward. But for the time being, shout out McDonald's in a Cincinnati suburb for letting me podcast with you.
Well, I don't know if you even can change it at this stage. I feel like it might be part of the charm of this podcast. And another thing that's worth mentioning, only this episode of this podcast is going to be on this feed. We're actually going to be starting a new feed for this episode. We'll let you know for this podcast, whenever that goes live, we'll let you know. We'll tweet it out. We'll get it out there for the masses to see. But we kind of just wanted to do a proof of concept, a test episode, to see what you guys think of it. So with that in mind, please, with whatever you guys think, reach out to us. Tell us what you think. Tell us ways we can make it better. Tell us if you think it sucks and you don't think we should do it anymore. Just seriously, let us know anything that you think of this episode or of this podcast idea and kind of reach out. Don't be afraid because we want to hear from you.
Yeah, for sure. And we should preface it with, you can't replace us or our voices. Like, you're stuck with us if it's going forward.
Yes, you are stuck with Reags and I if this is happening. We might get some guests on occasionally, but probably it's just going to be Reags and I going forward. Before we get into that, like I said, we're going to use lines for games as a way into kind of talking about these teams. And given the Bonzie Colson news breaking yesterday, he's going to miss 8 weeks with a fracture in his foot. I thought it'd be interesting to talk about NC State and Notre Dame. Notre Dame's -7 in this game. I am pretty surprised that the line here is only 7. It seems like, according to Ken Palm's projections, which still don't really bake in the idea of Colson being out, sportsbooks have only penalized Notre Dame 3 points for losing Bonzie Colson, and that seems relatively low to me.
Yeah, I mean, so I tweeted this out when Notre Dame lost to Indiana at the Crossroads Classic, and I said, is Notre Dame this year's Indiana? And this just feels even more like it, right? Like, this is the OG Anunoby injury from last year.
Yeah, they've been sneaky bad defensively.
Right, and top 5 team after an early season big win. Last year was Indiana beating Kansas. This year was Notre Dame beating Wichita State. And then you had the bad loss. Last year was Indiana at Fort Wayne. This year, Notre Dame home against Ball State. Like, there's a lot of similarities, and that's not a good thing for Notre Dame. Because this is a team that, they had Final Four caliber talent, and they've always just kind of seemed to be there. I mean, they haven't been in the Final Four, obviously, but they always seem to be in the second weekend.
So, yeah, I think that Notre Dame is definitely a team that had aspirations for the Final Four, but, at the very least had aspirations to get to the second weekend again, as you said. And the thing that keeps bugging me about this team is that their defense is a total mess right now. So over the course of the last month, they've given up 81 points in 64 possessions to Michigan State, 80 points in 72 possessions to Ball State, 68 in 66 possessions to Delaware, 80 in 73 possessions to Indiana, 87 in 78 possessions to Dartmouth. That is just not good enough defensively. And now that you have no real margin for error offensively because Bonzie Colson is out, I'm really worried about how this thing is going to go whenever they have to find a way to scratch and claw for offense as well as find a way to slow things down defensively.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been their bugaboo, right? Like, it's always been Notre Dame can score, can they defend? And this is a whole new animal because Bonzie Colson at least provided. Now, granted, he was 6'5", but had that super long wingspan. He at least provided something, and now you're relying on a freshman in DJ Harvey. It's just not a great situation.
Yeah, I don't think it's a great situation either. I'm pretty worried about them going forward, but let's go on ahead and move on to the meat of this podcast where we're going to talk about particular games, right? So North Carolina is a 1-point underdog at Florida State tonight. I'm a little bit surprised by this line, to be honest. And I know that Florida State's been fine this year. I know that North Carolina has lost to Wofford and underwhelmed a little bit. But I look at North Carolina, I think they're a lot better than Florida State, particularly now that Cam Johnson is back in the lineup.
I think it is shocking to a degree that Florida State's -1, but it's a road game. We've seen UNC struggle both on the road and at home with teams that they are definitely better than. I think they're definitely better than Tennessee. They led for all of 90 seconds, just happened to be the last 90 seconds. They're definitely better than Wofford. They lost to Wofford and trailed the entire second half. They're definitely better than Wake Forest. They should have lost to Wake Forest. They got bailed out at the end with Joel Berry, hitting a floater, and honestly, Wake Forest just falling apart down the stretch. So, my question is, how good is this UNC team? And I've been kind of banging the drum of this in the preseason going, they feel a lot more top 20, top 25 than they are top 10, top 15 that, the public can kind of perceive them as. So, I think they are better than Florida State, but you're talking a road conference game in a league and a year where teams are very comparable and, the talent disparity isn't that far apart to where UNC should be favored by 6 or 7 on the road.
Yeah, I definitely don't think they should be favored by 6 or 7, but I look at this Florida State team and I kind of think it's I don't want to say like a tailor-made matchup for North Carolina, but it does look pretty good to me, just given the fact that North Carolina, even though they're not like the transcendent offensive rebounding team they've been in past years, they still do gather they gather 35.7% of their own misses, which is 27th in the country. Florida State is only gathering 66.4% of defensive rebounds, which is 307th in the country. I just kind of think that North Carolina is going to eat this team up. Like, you look at, I know that Florida State has been playing Obiagu a little bit more in the middle. They've been trying to play the Kabengele guy, Mofiondu Kabengele. Phil
I'm
Cofer,
so glad
though,
you pronounced that name.
What did you say?
I'm so glad you said his name because I had his name written down and I was going to butcher it so bad.
Yeah, I don't even know if I got it right, to be honest. But like, they play Phil Cofer at the 4. That's a decent matchup for Luke May. This isn't a team that's going to overwhelm North Carolina with size, which I feel like is possible with this UNC team at times. So I just kind of look at UNC. I think they're a little bit more talented than Florida State, and they're going to be able to play a pretty similar style while still just hammering the offensive glass.
My only thing is Florida State shoots the ball well, and North Carolina does not defend the three-point line.
That's an interesting point.
Florida State is shooting 39% from the three-point line. Carolina, as a team, is giving up 37%. Three's worth more than 2. That's the kind of way I look at it, especially at home.
Well,
where
there's that too, and there's the fact that they're giving up 3-pointers on 42.2% of their opponent field goals, which is 300th in the country. And I think, as most people know at this stage, but maybe not, reducing 3-point attempts is actually the best defense for 3-point defense, just because you don't have as much control over whether or not a team takes threes as you do, or you don't have as much control over whether or not a team makes threes as you do over whether or not they take them.
Yep, and it's the fact that not only is Carolina giving up a lot of 3-point attempts, they're giving up makes. That's a bad combination.
Yeah, it's I think that that's a fair point. I would stay away from this game generally if I was betting, but
same here. But I would take Florida State. I like the home. I like going on home, especially where it almost feels like they are begging you to take North Carolina.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Let's move on. Let's talk about Kentucky and LSU. This LSU team has been kind of feisty this year just because of Tremont Waters. Like they beat a good Houston team at home earlier this year. They beat Michigan earlier this year, and that looks like a really, really good win now. Kentucky, on the other hand, I guess that they've been kind of underwhelming, but I don't know that I would even say that. Like, I feel like they've been pretty solid. I think that they're actually a little bit underrated in the AP poll right now.
I would agree with that. The
biggest thing that I look at in this matchup is this is going to be just like an offensive rebounding disaster because both these teams tend to miss a decent amount of shots, and both of them just hammer the offensive glass and really, really struggle to try and slow down the opponent on the defensive glass. Kentucky is 12th in offensive rebounding rate. LSU is 257th in defensive rebounding rate. LSU is 20th in offensive rebounding rate. Kentucky is 240th in defensive rebounding rate. I think whoever wins the offensive rebounding battle wins this game, and I'm going to take Kentucky to do that just because they have the better athletes.
Yeah, I like that. The other two things I had written down, I wrote down the same thing as you in terms of rebounding. Who can win the point guard battle? Because both teams will play 2 point guards on the floor. Right?
Yeah.
We've seen Kentucky go just Alexander and Quade Green. We've seen LSU go Waters and Skylar Mays. Gilgeous Alexander continue this 20-point outburst that he's had the last 2 games. Can Green continue to hit outside shots? Once that happens, the entire lane opens up, and then Kentucky is just going to dominate the offensive rebounds. As good as Tremont Waters has been, Quade Green and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander combined are better than him and Skylar Mays.
If I'm Kentucky, I'm just throwing Shai on Trey Waters and just saying, okay, Shai is 6'6", Trey is probably 5'10". Let's just let Shai cause all sorts of issues to him with his length and kind of see if that just totally bogs down LSU's offense. I think Kentucky wins this game by like 7 or 8. It's worth saying this is Kentucky's first true road game of the season. That's going to be a really, really interesting test for them at the very least, just because you have a lot of freshmen going on the road for the first time. LSU can be a tough place to play. But at the same time, I just think they're a lot better. Like, I just think they're a lot better than LSU is.
The other thing is, how many times do we see Kentucky put back-to-back kind of bad games? Like, they struggled against Georgia. They kind of have, it's one good game, one bad game, right? So they're on pace for what should be a good game after that Georgia game.
Yeah, I think so, too. I think that they're just, like I said, I just think they're better than LSU. Virginia -3 at Virginia Tech. This is at least an interesting one from the perspective of this is 2 very different teams stylistically, I think. Virginia is going to want to obviously slow the game down. They're going to want to play with no tempo. Virginia Tech is starting to speed teams up. They're 64th in the country in pace of play. They're number 1 in effective field goal percentage still, even though that number's coming down a little bit as their 3-point percentage starts to drop a little bit. I don't really know what to do with this game, to be honest. I like what I've seen from Virginia. I think that they're a little bit deeper.
I'll tell you what I like here is the over. 133.5. Because Virginia's can hit shots. Like, they're a good 3-point shooting team.
Yeah.
And Virginia Tech's going to give up looks, right? Like, they're just going to try to speed you up. Virginia can attack against this press. My question is, what game do they get from Ty Jerome? Because he's going to be the key. Because Guy, Hall are going to attack against Virginia Tech, just kind of pushing the tempo. Can Ty Jerome give them something there, too?
Yeah, I think he can. He's hitting 46% of his threes. Kyle Guy's hitting 46% from 3. Devin Hall is hitting 44% from 3. Those 3 guys are how Virginia spaces the floor, basically. One number that does scare me a little bit, as we mentioned before in the North Carolina section, the best way to prevent threes is by not giving them up. Virginia actually has given up a bunch of threes this year on a field goal attempt basis. They're 310th nationally in 3-point attempt percentage against. They're giving up 30.5% on those 3-point attempts, but I don't know, man. Like that's a scary number to me. I think I like the over more than I like anything here, too. I agree.
Yeah, because Virginia Tech can get hot, right? Like, they're a good three-point shooting team, and while they aren't necessarily going to play inside out like you see a lot of teams try to do against the back line, they can get hot.
Yeah, and you can shoot a team
they
out
can
of the
easily.
back line.
If you tell me Virginia Tech scores, yeah, right, and if you tell me Virginia Tech scores 75, 80 points tonight, I'm not going to be overly shocked because it's at home and Virginia Tech's just that good offensively.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Basically, I'm staying away from that one too, but I do like the over. Clemson -6 at Boston College. You wanted to talk about this game, and I kind of agree with you, but it's funny because we wanted to talk about this game for different reasons. I wanted to talk about it because I really have enjoyed watching Clemson this year. They start 3 juniors and 2 seniors. They have a senior and a junior that come off the bench as their 6th and 7th men. They just get after you so hard defensively that they've been really, really fun for me to watch this year. You wanted to talk about it from Boston College's perspective. What has interested you about Boston College?
Not necessarily interest, but the fact that I've gotten asked about them a lot on Twitter saying, are they a tournament team? Are they a tournament team? And everyone remembers the Duke win. That's their only top 125 win on KenPom.
Yeah.
So, no, they're not a tournament team. They have one really good win, one awesome atmosphere, one awesome win, but they got to do a lot of work still, right? Like, that resume it stinks. I mean, that's the only way to put it. So I think this is step number 2. You get the win over Duke, obviously. This is step number 2 to try and build Boston College to what could be a bubble team. And you have to win, a home game against Clemson, which is a top 30 KenPom team, a projected NCAA tournament team, a projected top half ACC team. You win this, now Boston College might be onto something. And that backcourt, I really like that backcourt, but they each play like 85 to 90% of the minutes. Can that be sustained?
I think it can be sustained for this particular game. I don't know if it can be sustained long term. The thing that Clemson does, like I said, that I think just kind of is going to propel them to a win in this game is that they defend. Like, they're actually really, really good on the perimeter defensively. They can help with guys like Dante Grantham and David Scara and who is the freshman, Sims, I think is his name. Like, he's actually relatively mobile and can do some stuff defensively.
Right.
I just kind of like what I've seen from Clemson. Plus, you would think that this is a team that doesn't really get flustered on the road, and they've kind of shown that this year. They've actually won both of their road games at Ohio State, and it was like a kind of a neutral site game in Florida against Florida, but I would call that a road game. That stadium was BB&T, I think it was, and it was pretty packed with Florida fans and Florida State fans. So I like the fact that they're experienced. They're going on the road. They probably know what they're doing on the road, unlike a Duke team, for instance, that doesn't defend and doesn't really had ever been on the road. I think that was their first road game of the season. So I like Clemson here. I just think they're a better team.
The other thing I like about Clemson is they don't rely on turnovers. Like, they're just a solid defensive team. They're going to get rebounds and then go. Yeah. Like, they're not forcing live ball turnovers. They don't rely on that. They rely on just defense. The one weird thing about Clemson, though, is they're back 5 guys averaging 11.5 points per game or above. But then the 6th leading scorer and everyone else below is like 3.5 points per game. It's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time because you want a little bit more spread out. Like, I don't think you want 5 at 11.5 and then everyone else below 3.5. But the 5 at above 11.5 means you can't just game plan against one person to take them away. Like, you're not going to say, all right, we're going to take Shelton Mitchell away, and then Elijah Thomas goes off.
Yeah, I just don't think Boston College is good enough defensively to even cause issues like that. You know what I mean? Like, they're 94th in adjusted defensive rating.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they're just they don't force any turnovers. They give up a pretty high percentage from 2-point range, which is a place where Clemson has actually seen a lot of success this year. Yeah, I mean, maybe Boston College shows us something different. Maybe they are much better than what people think they are right now, and maybe they're a little bit better than what their resume says. But I'm going to stick with Clemson. Maybe they don't cover, but I think that Clemson wins.
Yeah, I would also go under 141.
Yeah, that's actually a good number too. I like that. The last thing we're going to do on this episode is we're going to give our favorite pick of the night. For me, in this episode, that is going to be St. Bonaventure -2 at Dayton. Dayton has been sneaky bad this year. Not even sneaky.
It's been sneaky.
Yeah, they've just been kind
They're
of
just flat out bad.
bad. Like, they've lost to Hofstra, Penn, Duquesne, Old Dominion by 8 on a neutral court. Like, St. Mary's handled them with utter ease. Auburn handled them with ease. I haven't just seen anything from this Dayton team that says they can even really deal with St. Bonaventure.
Yeah, I agree with you. Dayton is typically a tough place to play, but you got students on break. You got a team that's down, a young team. I think they're going to be fine in a year or two.
Yeah.
This specific game, yeah, for sure. And I'm going to go with Georgia -5 at home against Ole Miss. They're comparable on KenPom. I think Georgia's 61, Ole Miss is 84, so not too much of a jump. But I think Georgia's sneaky better than average. Like they're just a hair above average. Where Yante Maton is going to be the best player on the floor, and to me that's a big thing. I think you see Georgia kind of bounce back from that Kentucky game. They can ugly a game up, but they can also get up and down at the same time if they really need to. But I just trust Yante Maton against an Ole Miss team that I think they're one of the bottom 4 teams in the SEC. 5 is kind of a low number. I think you see Georgia win that game by like 9.
Yeah, I'm probably staying away from this one because I like the idea of Mississippi's guards going up against Georgia's guards, but they also don't really have anyone that I think can defend.
But Georgia can also throw a bunch of different weird defenses still.
Yeah, they can. That's what they do all the time. Like Mark Fox is pretty good at those little junk defenses that can cause issues for opposing teams, particularly ones that struggle to shoot a little bit, which is something we've seen from Mississippi State outside of Terrence Davis and DeAndre Burnett. So
you mean Ole Miss?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ole Miss. But yeah, I mean it's possible. I mean, even I guess Furman Vicious has shot reasonably well this year too, but I can see this being an issue for Mississippi, and that being at home with Georgia, I can see that. All right, Reags, tell the people where they can find your work before we kind of give our spiel again at the end.
Yeah, so you can find everything on Twitter at Barstool Reags, and you can read all my stuff at barstoolsports.com.
Again, this has just been kind of a pilot episode. I'll be interested to see what the quality is on the sound. I have not gone through it yet. It might be a little bit ugly. Please just kind of, I guess, don't. If that's your advice, I kind of understand it already, just as a heads up. So it's going to get better in the future. It's worth just kind of pointing that out from the jump. Having said that, this has been the Game Theory Podcast. Again, we're just looking for any sort of feedback, any sort of anything that you guys want to tell us that you found interesting about it, that you found a good concept with it. Did you enjoy us talking about the teams? Did we focus too much on something versus another thing? Just let us know.
Should we let fans pick the games, or do you want us to continue to pick the top 4 games?
No, I think that's a really great idea too. We can get really interactive with this stuff too. So until next time, though, we'll talk soon. Bye.